I have the honor to invite April Boyd Noronha to join us. And April is coming from Kansas City today, directly to our global audience. And April has over 20 years of experience in academia and advanced technologies as a thought leader and advisor on operational excellence, business transformation, and customer experience. Her primary focus is centered on emerging trends and the future of work at the intersection of diversity, equity, and inclusion. She is the president of the Cyberstar Coalition, formed specifically to address the need for diversity and inclusion in both the cybersecurity and XR domains. In her role as a global diversity and inclusion advisor and board member for the XR Safety Initiative, she collaborates with global partners and allies to help build safe, immersive environments for all. April, it's a real honor to have you with us. We're very much looking forward to your presentation. I think you're going to bring some really interesting new perspectives to our audience today.
Thank you, Jose. I'm excited to be here as well. And things are being shown? Oops.
Yeah, everything looks good.
Great. Hello, everyone. As Jose mentioned, my name is April Boyd Noronha, and I will be presenting today the top 4 rules of engagement for digital transformation through human-centered design. So I'm excited to be here to talk about digital transformation with you today. So 2 forms of my roles that I am currently excited about having the opportunity in the industry is as president of the Cyberstar Coalition. And there I lead a global team that addresses and helps shift the mindsets of both public and private stakeholders in both the XR or extended reality and cybersecurity ecosystems. And so in collaboration with both of those, I collaborate with decision makers, influencers and industries that range from big tech in Silicon Valley, even to local companies and academia in various communities. Equally important, I also serve as the Global Diversity and Inclusion Advisor and a board member for the XR Safety Initiative. Now that is like the parent company for the Cyberstar Coalition. When the XRSI was launched, they, in about the 2nd year of them being launched, felt that there was a distinct need for a diversity and inclusion sector to focus totally on that within extended realities and cybersecurity ecosystems. So I partner with C-suite executives, allies, and peers, once again, to help build safe, immersive environments that in turn create lasting collaborations for helping this ecosystem establish industry-wide standards on human-centric operability first and foremost. And of course, I will talk more about that. In addition to the fact that it includes privacy, security, and safety. So I also, in my role as the board member, I encourage a global policy coordination that furthermore helps foster a healthy research ecosystem. So not only do we do the research that incorporates right into industry-wide standards. So last but not least, I also serve as professor of health information management and cybersecurity. So as you can see, I'm in that great dynamic intersection of a lot of emerging trends and emerging technologies of today. But I want to start with this. As many companies grapple with the unprecedented circumstances surrounding COVID-19 pandemic and things of the such, this time also presents an opportune time to actively address the human side of operational excellence in today's workplaces and virtual environments. It may seem as if it should naturally occur, but sometimes we need that extra oomph or that extra attention that needs to be brought to that human-centric side. So many businesses are faced with introducing new standards, strategic policies, and government mandates. So in this quest to operate in operational excellence and deliver value to customers, At the very core of this cultural shift is human-centered design. So even though digital transformation may look different for every company, particular industries, or new sectors of innovation, essentially, the future of work starts at the intersection of 4 distinct rules of engagement. And those rules include accessibility, diversity and inclusion, ethics and awareness, and trust and safety. So the Cyberstar Coalition is a global organization, which is critical. I will mention that throughout my presentation today, because the world is becoming smaller. It used to be the 6 degrees of separation. Now I think it's about 2 on any given day, and depending on the particular industry. So with that in mind, we were intentional with developing and seeking, making it be a global organization as we focus on addressing the need for diversity and inclusion in emerging technologies. But we also study the positive as well as unintended consequences that evolve within that rapid adoption in various domains and ecosystems. So our expert ensemble of advisors and founding members of the coalition include global thought leaders, industry established influencers, and world-renowned experts, whether that's in academia or in various ecosystems. So we are uniquely positioned to watch, assess, and set specific targets and implement policies, and as you'll see, standards, industry-wide standards, that literally help reshape the mindset towards more diverse and inclusive companies and communities worldwide. So when I talk about a global collaborative, I want to peel back the layers just a little bit more, and so you'll understand the perspective and the mindset that the Cyberstar Coalition operates within when we collaborate and guide and advise other companies. So XRSI I've spoke about already. Mookie International is one of our founding partners that hails from the UK. Gamer Safer within the gaming and digital economies is in the US. The OpenAR Cloud is based in Germany. The first one to the bottom left is Equal Entry, that focuses on accessibility, and they hail from Japan. InfoSec Girl is the cross section between cybersecurity and primarily though, and they are from India. OWASP is global, and then there's a space just for you to join us as well if need be. So when I talk about a global collaborative, we were strategic and intentional in that. So as I mentioned, we launched industry-wide standards that introduced a unique approach for organizations to successfully integrate the digitals into their areas of business. We launched this last year, and you can see from on the left side of your screen that we once again focused on accessibility, inclusion, ethics, and safety. We chose those 4 principles primarily. Now, of course, there are more, but we chose those 4 concepts because we felt that those were the more pressing and honestly the more emerging principles that needed to be addressed initially. And that, we launched those last year, and we were pretty much on target with focusing on those 4. But our guide does 4 things. And when we collaborate and advise companies and corporations, it provides best practices. Who doesn't need those? It provides adoption-ready processes, so they can be applied tomorrow. They can be applied. In some of the instances, we provided even a 10-step guide that, not that it's a checklist, but a surefire, adoption-ready guide that can be applied at any time. The guide also helps businesses reimagine this new normal that is emerging, or that we are operating within. And last but certainly not least, it helps companies best leverage this digital transformation that we all are in. So when I talk about human-centric design being this new normal of interoperability, When we thought about launching our guide, we created this novel concept that you see in the graphic to your right, where it is the perfect intersection between trust, inclusion, and accessibility. And we call it our TIA triad for human-centric design in XR ecosystems. And so it is based on two essential components. The first is the development of a baseline practice or practices that can be across the board that enables organizations, developers, content creators, all the XR stakeholders as applicable to help make ethics and inclusion-based decisions for building immersive experiences. So the key there is that they are baseline practices. We are not reaching for pie in the sky types of concepts, but baseline practices that can be applied easily, efficiently, and readily. Once again, looking at the fact that this human-centric design is the new normal of interoperability, the second component is the development of voluntary consensus-driven standards. Not only standards, but policies and guidelines that further enable XR or digital transformations in organizations to make pragmatic and impact-driven decisions that furthermore help create human-centric design within that development of these new digital and transformative ecosystems. So it's a two-prong process that is baked within the fiber of this human-centric design. So the design is there, the guide and standards are set in place, but with the implementation of this novel industry-wide standards and processes, we designed that with 5 crucial points. We knew what needed to be baked into the very fabric of creating and evolving these new transformative systems was that we could not leave anyone behind. In order for this to be as vibrant and dynamic of a new system, it had to be diverse and inclusive. Even more important, or equally important, is that it had to be accessible for any and all that want to be a part of this new digital ecosystem. We also knew that we had to protect identities. And what do I mean by that? With protecting identities, when you enter digital realms or digital ecosystems, a lot of times people may not be able to create, particularly like an avatar that represents them. On the other vein, they may not want to be as presented as they are in the real world. A lot of times when we talk to big tech and advise them on how things should be, like for instance, I was on a panel before, and one of the persons that are in the XR realm, a content creator, mentioned that she does not enter digital experiences as herself. Now, she is a female of color, but the reasoning behind that, the method of the madness, was that it protected her identity, because at times when she did enter the digital realm, she may have been harassed, experienced discriminatory practices against her. So it protects a sense of protecting a person's identity when they are in a digital realm or in the XR ecosystems. Also, a fourth point is that we wanted to make sure that we had the mindset that when people enter digital experiences, that they feel safe and secure. Unfortunately, there have been instances where people within digital realms have had breaches of confidentiality, where actions that have occurred in there were not appropriate. And unfortunately, there were not parameters within that system to prevent that. And so we talk a lot with organizations and software developers and persons on that back end to really take that under consideration. Once again, and you'll hear me say this, it must be baked within the very framework so that it is an efficient and positive, safe, and secure realm for people to enter. And then last but not least, we wanted to make sure that these new rules help promote trust. you know, we're seeing now, and this is the emerging trends and technologies that we're interacting with, that if the trust factor is not there, that successful transformation will not occur. So these 5 points are 5 crucial points that, once again, when we're talking about immersive tech standards, when we're talking about digital transformations, that within that implementation, they must be actively and ongoing, be an ongoing process of being examined. So let's talk about the 4 principles that we decided to focus on. Accessibility. So it's not just about making sure that you meet legal requirements. Accessibility is not just, you know, checking that box to make, you know, to make sure that that's been checked off and done. Accessibility is about good hardware and software design, right? It's about development and coding. It also is about appropriate testing and training, initially, ongoing, and even, you know, before that next iteration occurs. Equally important, it is also about building a culture of care. So when we talk about accessibility, the benefit then, if we consider these 4 points, is that mistakes in that re-engineering design frameworks are less likely to occur if we build a culture of accessibility from the ground up. And I also want to challenge the viewers today that when we think about accessibility, initially, you know, what do you think about? It's a physical thing, but now more so, when we're talking about a human-centric design, it extends so much further beyond just accessibility. Not to say that it's not equally important, but accessibility with a digital access, accessibility with having the components, like I mentioned before, hardware and software design that enables a positive experience as well when they interact with whatever digital transformation that your company or that your corporation is implementing. So it goes way beyond our traditional definition of accessibility. And that's one thing that we talk about more so in our guide. A second principle is diversity and inclusion. And, you know, the world as a whole, I believe that we are at a crossroads between emerging technology, data sciences, and cybersecurity. You know, I tell people all the time, I love the honor of being able to be a professor and to teach in these 3 realms. But this technology is being fueled by a renewed global necessity for diversity and inclusion in each of these 3 domains: emerging technology, data sciences, and cybersecurity. If you're not feeling this impact directly with your company, you're feeling it in other ecosystems that you may engage in. So it is equally important that extended reality and digital ecosystems and experience should reflect the real society. And what do I mean by that? I was on another panel before, and one of the audience members asked, does racism stop when you enter XR? And we paused because I know the answer. And when I answered the audience member, we were like, that does not stop exclusion practices. They don't stop. Racism, sexism, all the isms does not stop. It does not end when you enter into spatial computing or XR or extended reality. And especially it can be more harmful for marginalized populations because the system is not set up to encourage that full exposure and positive experience. So how can we benefit from expanding our concept of diversity and inclusion when we deal with digital transformation or when we begin to implement digital transformation at our workplaces? If introduced and implemented with great thought and care, it creates a heightened level of standards for all community members to participate fully, because that is what you want. If you build it, you want them to come, right? And if they come, you want that experience to be the most positive experience for all of those that use that process or those principles. You want them to participate fully within that community that you have built. But also, it helps the social community run smoothly as participants agree to abide by ethical standards, respective rules, and prescribed protocols as outlined. Remember, one recurring theme that I'll talk about today is that baseline standards. We're not, you're not going to change everything overnight, but if you start with baseline standards, that will have that transition be a little bit more smoother and for all community members to benefit and participate fully. And when we talk about ethics and awareness, the coalition, we know that essentially we are shaping the future for the best possible outcome by literally defining digital ethics. That may be a new term for some of you, but defining digital ethics. What are ethical principles and practices that should be synonymous with, digital transformation and emerging technology. We also address this challenge that we face today while building an aware industry and society. So digital ethics, once again, part of the components that need to be baked within the very framework. So let's consider this. What changes will the emerging technologies have on our minds and bodies? I already addressed the fact that the concept of social digital transformation in extended realities is that some people still have to grasp the concept that that avatar is a real person. That avatar, it represents a human form. And so when we enter realms or enter spatial communities, we have to keep that in mind. It is an emerging technology, but what changes will that have on persons' minds and bodies, especially as we see this closer intersection between humans and machines? We have AI, we have machine learning. And so what effect will that have on our relationships with each other and the state of the new environment or that digital environment? And these are approaches that we outline in our standards and our guide for immersive technology. A lot of times these are not considered by the content creators, by the software developers. That there's an old adage that is mentioned that, in that big tech realm with emerging technologies, there people just want to build it fast, get it done so they can have the next best great thing that's out there. But what we're saying to this new world or entities or throughout this digital transformation process is that the ethics and awareness for that community, for the software developers as well as the users, have to be baked within the framework. Because if not, you have the reiteration, you'll have the mistakes, and lawsuits perhaps, and wasted time and human capital, which no company or corporation, small or large, global or local, wants to have to experience. So the approach is outlined in our standards to create an ethical filter within this digital transformation process. So we were intentional with knowing that we would have to present a new definition of digital ethics that will provide an ethical filter for that digital transformation process. And then trust and safety. We presented our novel approach to the advocacy, to the adoption of security, privacy, and ethical challenges. They happen, they occur, but within the extended reality realm, it can be that much more critical. As I mentioned before, in case in point, even with COVID now, a lot of people may not trust, this transformation of how we're collecting the data, how it is being assessed, how it is being accessed. These are things that must be considered from the initial process of how are we going to do this? How are we going to transform this process into one that is more digital? Yes, it's more efficient. Yes, it is quicker. Yes, it seems to help streamline the process. But within all that, are there security, privacy, and ethical components being considered along the way? So the standard outline that we created is focused on a new degree of trust that once again goes beyond the traditional concepts of privacy and safety. It also uncovers this need for a new mindset to help minimize abuse of data and privacy. And I'll show you some examples in the presentation today as well, because a lot of people don't consider that when they're in that process of that digital transformation in the workplace. So XR, or extended reality, and emerging technologies require us to understand the associated risks. As I just mentioned, we build it, hurry up, quick, get it out there, let's be the first. But we are finding that companies are not considering the associated risk in terms of safety. And we make sure that with our standards, that it's incorporated with privacy and security, because not only are these harms technical, but they can even be physical and psychological, as I mentioned before, entering a extended reality arena, and or as we look at this intersection between human and AI and machine learning and concepts of that sort. So trust and safety is equally important as well. So when I talked about assessing and addressing social and technical biases in digital technology, I wanted to further peel back the layer and really leave you with the mindset of, wow, this occurs, right? So let's look at recruiting practices, right? So one case that I found was where a new system was implemented, but it was to rate candidates, but it wasn't gender centric, right? So they used the algorithms that was based on a 10-year period of prior applicants. But the key here was that most of the applicants from this prior 10-year span were males. So of course, you know, good in, good out, or not good information or data does now spit out or processes data that is not correct. So even in recruiting systems, and we found this, you know, there are cases after cases in big tech and you know, recruiting practices across the board where this is a diversity and inclusion concern for many. Once again, when we talk about digital transformation within the workplace, if algorithms are implemented or you know, have data that is not accurate, that is not timely, or that in this case in the recruiting practices is not gender centric, this is what occurs. Okay, let's take another instance where in higher education, where the ACT, I think it might be a current case, where the ACT flagged students' test scores. Some recruiters disclosed their confidential information to colleges for pre-admission, and they stigmatized students with disabilities in the admission process. Somehow, some students found out that these inappropriate practices were happening. Once again, within digital systems, they were flagging particular students. So, well, we know this is a civil rights violation. But once again, it was baked into that system to flag scores that impacted the admission process for students that had disabilities. Okay, let's look at the US court system, right? So the COMPAS, the Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions, had, once again, an algorithm that used in the US court systems that predicted the likelihood that a defendant would become a recidivist, so be back into the system, the court system. Now, once again, this was baked within the algorithm. So the model predicted, and you know, if it's predicting it, it must be right. Not always, but this particular model, over a span of time, predicted that twice as many false positives for recidivism for Black offenders were at 45%, than white offenders at 23%. So you kind of see where I'm going with this. We must take in consideration the human factor, the human-centric factors when we're dealing with or implementing or updating transformation within a digital realm. Last but not least, in healthcare, right? I wanted to make sure I gave you a span of industries or ecosystems so that you can see this impact of possible social and technical biases in digital technology. And so here, the last example, in healthcare, a study found that there was an algorithm that was used on more than 200 million people in US hospitals, was used to predict which patients would likely need extra medical care, where it found it heavily favored white patients over Black patients. Once again, civil rights, discrimination, ethical practices come into play here. But once again, our role as the Cyberstar Coalition is to assess and address these social and technical biases. Some, of course, are unintended. We know that. But still in that same vein, we shed light on the fact that this, assessing and addressing of social technical biases, especially within the digital transformation process, is critical. And you can see the impact as well. So when we talk about operational excellence as a value-based systems approach, fundamentally, the successful digital transformation is based on, and I listed here, 5 principles. Now, there could be more, there could be less, but I wanted to center on these 5 in relation to my presentation today. So it's essentially fundamental that it is based on people. We're talking today about that human-centered design. So the digital transformation, the systems, extended realities, there must be accessible for a diverse and inclusive population. The process is ongoing. Excellence is not achieved overnight. So it is going to be a process. It's going to be some iteration. It is going to be going back to the table. But primarily what we need to focus on and what we remind our clients to focus on is that it is a process. But if you start the process with a human-centric approach, that will allow for more efficiency and more accuracy and more engagement with your clients. I already talked about the 4 pillars that we felt that we needed to, from the onset, focus on with our guide. And we talked about those, but importantly, that it is baked within the framework. It's not an afterthought. That it's not just being considered that let's build this next best great thing, but we have to take in consideration the human factors, that avatar, that process will impact people, as I just mentioned in the previous slide, and that it is practiced industry-wide. If one company does it this way and another this way, we are not getting the industry-wide consistency. And that consistency then builds awareness within that ecosystem. A lot of times when companies or persons or individuals contact us, a lot of times it's because of a siloed process or a siloed industry that is trying to practice within, in the West Coast or the East Coast or within another nation. Even we see this even with contact tracing and just healthcare disparities that we're experiencing even now, where one country is doing it this way and another is implementing it this way, where we need some consistency. And that consistency then builds awareness within that entire ecosystem. Last but not least, we must make sure that the policy that is being implemented, that is being considered, that is being updated or adjusted or tweaked, that it is safe for the consumers, for the users, that it is sound, trustworthy, and fair. Essentially, that the practices, that the policy is one that is ethical. So essentially what we're asking, I wanted to encourage those that are listening today that, you know, we have launched our membership model. So we cannot do this on our own. And we're asking persons to join us. We are in the process of launching or preparing to launch our next version of our original immersive technology guide on those standards. And even the XRSI is working on a new privacy standard for the industry as well. So we encourage people to join us in our journey of, once again, engaging and informing the general community and ecosystems. It is about digital transformation, right? In workplaces everywhere. So we know that these principles will not stop. We know that emerging trends will continue. And even more importantly, it's going to be more rapid and a need for more rapid adoption of these principles that must be human-centric. So we need people to help us with that. You know, from students to professionals and to industry members such as yourself, to be a part of building, creating, designing a more human-centric transformation process in digital experiences. So I want to kind of close on this quote. And this is kind of our beacon, our mission of what we do, and why we do the things that we practice and talk about. It's really easy to look away, but to make good choices, we have to understand the impact, the human impact. If we turn away, the choices will still get made. The adoption, the emergence of digital transformation is still going to occur, but they just don't get made by people who care or understand. We, the coalition, are the people who care. We're the ones who understand how choices should be made. We are the Cyberstar Coalition, and that is why we always come from a standpoint of human-centric design. So I encourage you all to download our immersive technology standards. And as I mentioned before, that focuses initially on accessibility, inclusion, ethics, and safety. And as I mentioned before, we are in the process of starting to begin research on our version 1.1 as well. And we're seeking people to help and assist in that research as well. So my name is April Boyd-Noronha, and I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation on human-centric design for digital transformation in today's workplace. I've included my email to contact me, as well as our social media platforms to join, link with us, and things of that sort to engage further on this digital transformation journey. Thank you.
Fantastic, April. Thank you for the presentation. You have explored a new area of digital transformation for all of us, and open our eyes to the possibilities and the challenges in this new world of advanced digital technologies that may include avatars and representations and machine learning technologies and AI. So there's so much that can be discussed here on how we adhere, but I think to a large extent, to unconscious, patterns that we follow, right? And that as we move into this digital world, those can be perpetuated. Now, a number of good questions here. I encourage the audience to continue to provide the questions as we have some time here with April to delve a little bit deeper. The first question comes from William Fuller. William always asks some really good questions, so I appreciate you, William, and always very attentive and asking for kind of depth on some of the questions that he proposes. And specifically, he's saying, aside from being the right thing to do, what is the business case, especially in North America? If you think about the business case for North American organizations, what is the business case for these digital companies, if you will, or companies that are transforming to digital, to adhere to these standards? Is there a threat or a promise of regulatory intrusion over time? Other than, again, being the right thing to do, what do you see as the motivation or the fear, whatever it is that organizations have in North America to pay attention to what you're talking about here?
I do think that more regulatory practices will come into play. You have the GDPR, and European nations. So I do think that there will be more regulations that will mandate this. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that we're seeing this already, where there are government mandates and that must be in place. And then even more so, we cannot discount those stakeholders in the community. And they are getting a lot more vocal, and are demanding or expecting a lot more of accountability from the corporations. And that can be from HR, that can be from hiring practices, that can be from ethical principles that need to be baked within the framework. And they're being asked to be invited to the table as well. And so we have to create that environment for that to occur. How do we do that? We start with human-centric designs. When we implement a process, have we considered accessibility? Have we considered how, if this community can be built, or if this process can be implemented with a more diverse and inclusive feedback, and incorporating lived experience from those very users? When I talk to the accessibility community, a lot of times, they're standing in the background waving their flags with, we want to be a part of this community. We want to be a part of what you are building, this new digital transformation. But literally, they cannot access it. If we create a new app, they're created every day, hundreds of thousands of them. But if persons that may have an accessibility concern cannot access them, if there are no captions, simple. If there are no transcriptions, simple fix. But if we are not considering those simple human-centric factors, you're missing out on a whole new, a clientele. Simply thinking of even from the accessibility factor. And that's why I took more time to not even talk about just that it was a physical factor, but accessibility can be, Wi-Fi. Accessibility can be, addressing that digital gap. And so outreach then can continue to be a part of that digital transformation in workplaces, regardless whether it's North America, South, or what have you. So it's going to take peeling back layers. There's going to be, I think, more pressure from the government with mandates. There are even looking at innovative incentives, whether it's internal or external, could be a process as well to consider.
Very well, April. And some of our participants are mentioning that there is certainly an issue of compliance that can come into account with existing laws. For example, I think that the example that you used for the hiring processes using a machine learning algorithm that may lead to being out of compliance with Equal Employment Opportunity Compliance Act, so that could create issues. The follow-up question on that, if we go a bit more into the details of the standard, what are some of the advice that you have for organizations that are building, machine learning algorithms and algorithms in general, to avoid some of the social and technical biases that exist if they're looking at historical data that's often used to build some of the algorithms? So what practical advice or guidance do you have for companies that are building algorithms in terms of staying clear out of these biases?
Right. Well, as I mentioned in the presentation, we have to always consider good data in gives you good data out. And essentially the same on the other extreme. If it's bad data that is being fueled into the system, then we're going to get, I don't want to call it bad, but incorrect results or outcomes as well. So once again, two things. You have to make sure that you have the right people at the table at the right time. Some of our clients that we have advised and continue to advise in big tech is that, look, from the systems developers to the testing of consumers, it has to be a diverse population. Now, once again, when I talk about diverse and inclusive populations, I am including accessibility issues as well. That has really been a population that is, I don't want to say been ignored, but not accessed as it should be. And the good but downside to that is that they've created their own advocacy component to addressing corporations, and they've started their own testing and assessments. They're looking at their own research and applying it and using that as a tool for learning for companies. As I mentioned before, our founding member is out of Japan, and so he's really on the forefront with this organization of providing that critical data to the corporations. As I mentioned before, what best pool of data can you have than your consumers, than your users or your intended users? And so a lot of times when we talk to corporations, we understand that some of these results are unintended. We'll give you that. We understand that. But in the process of righting those wrongs, a lot of times we have to go back to the table from the beginning, which is why I talked about if we bake the principles in the foundation essentially, that will make the process more efficient and smoother and profitable and successful, which is what the business is for, to help the community and to be a good part of that community as well.
April, thank you so much. Frank Harper also making a comment here. Great presentation, very informative. We appreciate you taking the time to expand the horizons as we move into this digital world of the items that we need to be aware of, and as we keep moving and developing digital capabilities. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
And Jose, I did want to mention that throughout our guide, there are top 10 lists. As I mentioned, we wanted to make that guide adoption ready for all systems and all corporations at any given time. So I encourage people to look at that as well. But thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that was April talking about the Cyberstar Coalition and the work that's being done on developing standards for the digital world that we are all discussing here and migrating heavily towards. So great to have that perspective, a unique perspective, a way of stretching our view of the world and the opportunities, but also the challenges that we need to keep in mind as we move into a digital world. Next, we're going to have Harris Apostolopoulos, who is the Chief Transformation Officer for the PMO Global Alliance, an expert in project management, and he's going to talk about digital transformation from a project management perspective and a PMO perspective with us. Over 20 years of experience cross industry, and we very much look forward to that. So I'll see you back at the top of the hour with the presentation with the Chief Digital Transformation Officer for the PMO Global Alliance. See you back soon.